Can you feel the sunlight of a brand new day? Our hands held tight together, chase the gray skies away. Can you hear the music of our lullaby? The bloodshed and the tears have passed into the night.
Hello everybody, this is Snaris, and I'm back with a new walkthrough, and for a game that is near and dear to my heart, despite only releasing in the last 2.5 years. This is Eternights Expert Mode walkthrough. And I gotta say, it's extremely rare for a game like this at first, when you see it, to seem highly insignificant, but then when you actually play it, you get a completely different feeling for it. I love the music, and I love the combat despite how simple it is in this, because if I had described this game as anything, it's a Persona-like. Now, I've never actually played a Persona game myself, but I've seen all the trappings of what it is, and to me, a game that you play between 50 and 80 hours, that doesn't really appeal to me, especially since a lot of the combat is turn-based, whereas in this, it's third-person hack and slash. That's my jam, that's what I've always loved. And yeah, despite not having that deep of a romance system, surprisingly everything is pretty well put together, and you know, there's no romance that's necessarily worse than the other. And I remember now, looking back over this, I had to include that clip right there, just because there's stage lights on the outskirts, looks like a giant cock. Anyway, I called my character here Philip. You can technically call him whatever you want, but Philip is apparently a placeholder name for the main character, while the one guy who was developing this over a few years, before he went with Studio Sai and got it properly developed, that was the name he went with, so I just call him Philip as well. Before I get back to what I was saying before, this is the introduction to the combat. And yeah, a lot of it predicates on being able to perfect dodge, because if you keep attacking it over and over again, you won't be able to stun all the enemies all the time. So when you're running towards the enemy, run a little bit to the left or the right of them. That way, when you go to push X to dodge, or whatever button you're using on whatever console or platform, then you can pretty easily take them out. And while your sword never does that much damage to any enemy at all, apart from the weaker ones like this, ideally, you want to try and get a 4 or 5 hit combo in, and then it slows down the game and it shows a prompt that tells you to strike, just like I did then, and it does massive damage. And while you can see my health bar in the top left, there's a circle that's been blacked out and faded. Oh, by the way, these bat enemies, the first attack and swing they do is real easy. The second one is a quick jump attack. The third one is a little bit faster, just like the first attack, but it's a little bit faster, a little bit harder to deal with. But yeah, it's never about just raw damage as your sword. You've got to work towards all these different meters and bars and everything. And we'll revisit that more in the future, because that was a flash forward. And yeah, it's just, I really love the relationships between these characters. The narrative is pretty simple, but you know, I like it a lot. And this game has a lot of RPG elements. They're very simple, but you know, the more time you spend on your free days when you're not saving the world, building relationships, and you've got to dedicate one of those free days to doing a story mission, so you need to prepare before then. And then when you're ready, then you take on the final part of the act, and it goes part by part. And so the beginning of this game is pretty slow. On multiple replays, it's a little bit annoying, but between the PS4 and PS5 systems, and now on PC, which is what this is from, I've probably stacked up maybe 130 to 150 hours. The game itself, on your first time through, is probably only going to be about like 10, maybe 15 hours, depending on how much you indulge in. It's really not that bad. But as far as the characters go, all of them have their different uses. Like, the friend you have with you right now, who's just running like a retard, his name's Chani, and in the future of the game, he will be providing you with buffs to your health and your SP capacity, which means you can use more magic that your confidence or your allies use, because he can't actually go with you into combat properly because he can't fight. But there's also another guy character that'll be introduced in one of the last acts of the game, and he can't fight either, but he has some of the more useful upgrades. But otherwise, you'll just be joined by 3 different girls, and in the beginning of the game, it'll just be this one girl here, the pink-haired girl. That's Yuna. Now, the sequence here, it introduces you to some of these enemies first, and it brings up the concept of sneaking past enemies by lightly pushing the stick forward or lightly moving forward. That doesn't work for any enemy in the game ever. It's only for this one sequence. And it's supposed to teach you to treat these enemies with great respect and being careful not to engage them too much. But from this point onwards, as soon as Yuna says that you're all clear, you can pretty much just run ahead. But as you're running through there, just be aware of some around the corners. There'll be little hidden alcoves where enemies will be hiding. I just remember to go down this hall and not the other one because you run into a bit of steam and there's a guy waiting for you. Yes, there's a guy in there. Don't stay too close to the wall. So they will notice you and they will chase you, but they're not very fast at all. And I'm going to cut out a scene here coming up, which is kind of a shame, but it's actually rather brutal and probably the most brutal the game gets. Because in the beginning, there's a lot of emphasis on some pretty dark subject matter, but then later on, well, there's still a little bit of dark subject matter. It's never quite as strong as it is here. And so once this part is over, it introduces you to the idea of sprinting. Now, I don't know if it's a bug or something, but even when you're sprinting and you're avoiding all the obstacles on the ground, he'll still catch up to you and be right on your ass. And the moment you slow down at all, get caught on anything, you get caught. It's not that big of a deal. It's pretty hard to fail the sequence, to be honest. And at the end of it, you need to choose who you're hiding a locker with. And you can pick anybody you want. It doesn't really matter. Choice doesn't matter too much in this game. But it also introduces you to the quick time event, where sometimes during sword combos, it'll come up with a prompt to hit a certain button, and you've got to hit it within the rings. Now, I did a little bit of a cut here because I failed, because it told me like it had an X prompt, and so this is me playing on PC, and the controller by default is set to Xbox buttons, but I was playing with the PS5 controller. So when it said X, I thought it meant push X, but then I remembered, nah, it's got to be square. So there's a little bit of a fail there, but yeah, it's going to be a little transition here, and then I'm going to get it right. But yeah, the rings generally go down and shrink a lot faster, and they have a smaller gap to succeed. I don't know why this is, but I failed a lot more on those QTEs when I was playing here on PC than I did on console ever. But it still wasn't the end of the world because I played this game for a long time. I know it pretty much inside and out. And to be honest, even on Expert, I don't think anyone's really going to need much help with this because it's not a difficult game unless you make it deliberately difficult yourself, which is what I'm going to do in my next walkthrough when I do a pure Philip challenge run. And that's basically me just going through the entire game, not upgrading my character and not upgrading any of my allies and not using any of their abilities in combat. And then the game becomes a very big struggle. So anyway, I just left this in here because this is how you get your powers. Your arm gets cut off just like you saw in the dream. And then you're going to get a glowy sword arm. And then you're going to be able to fight. And I'll be able to talk a bit more about the combat afterwards. But essentially what a lot of the plot boils down to is there are 2 architects, Umbra and Lux, basically light and shadow, or shadow and light. And Lux, I suppose, won this war that had been going on for a while, and so Umbra was put into a deep sleep, but is still trying to use her influence through multiple magical items that they've trapped or locked away to influence people, including a former ally of Lux's, and help Umbra resurrect. And they somehow poisoned the Eternights drug, which in news advertisements in this game is supposed to be an anti-aging drug, but they somehow used it and poisoned it to be able to turn people into infected, hideous monsters. Now, I wish there is a lore page, but it's for all the different, it's like diary entries for what you go through in this game. I wish there was more dedicated lore to this because I think the lore of this game is actually quite fascinating. And there are multiple defenses set up by Umbra to prevent you from getting near the end, but as Lux's champions, you need to use your powers to go ahead and try and stop the ritual from resurrecting her. Now, this is where it introduces the elemental fist. You need to look at the element of the enemy and use the opposite to break its shield. So for anyone sporting the electric attribute, as you can see next to the boss's health bar, you have the attribute of light, which is this sort of purplish symbol. I'm not sure what it is exactly, but yeah. Every time you perfect dodge and you get hits on the enemy and you do strikes, you do massive build up and then use your elemental fist. And if you get them weak enough, or if you land a critical hit, then you can do multiple strikes. Further on through the game you go, the more you'll level up naturally, and so you'll be able to do multiple hits. So that move's pretty hard to dodge. This one's pretty simple. And again, standing still and pushing a button to roll forward and dodge, it doesn't always work. Sometimes you have to move around the enemy or alongside it just to give yourself a bit more of an advantage. And see, when you slay these bosses, or tougher enemies, you get black essence, which you use to upgrade your own skills, your sword skills, and your abilities. And on your free time, when you hang out with your teammates and train with them, or you go out scavenging for items that can help them feel better, then you gain white essence, which you can use to upgrade their abilities, which in turn can help you. So this is Lux right here, and she's more or less the one we're serving, and the one we got power from. And she's telling us that we have to break through a couple of walls in order to get to the middle and stop her former ally, Delia, from performing a ritual that will resurrect Umbra and end the world. So yeah, technically we are in an apocalypse scenario, and I've got a lot to say about Delia. I do not like her at all. Not necessarily bad as a character, I think she's fine, but I just hate her boss fight, because she's got the most inconsistent hitboxes. She's got some of the most damaging and most bullshit moves to dodge, and you've got to fight her through 2 different phases, and when you wear her down to almost dead, or basically dead, she comes back and regains all her health, all her barriers, but this time she gets stupid, like Hulk, glowing Hulk arms, and she fights you with some even more bizarre moves. I would argue that it's an easier phase than the first, but there's a couple of moves that are really tough to dodge and to evade and everything. And also, you can't hit her normally. You have to get a perfect dodge to be able to hit her with your sword, because if you try to hit her with your sword, it'll just bounce off. And you do technically have a great sword skill that you can unlock, but I never use it because it's way too slow, and I just never find it to be all that effective. Plus, you can't get a strike combo off of a greatsword combo, so, you know, it's one of the reasons why I don't bother with it. But this is the first proper exploration of combat sequences. What you want to learn is that the infected chicks dressed in the black uniforms that fire projectiles at you. By the way, I didn't even realize it until I did this, that if you get the strike, it slows down time for a few seconds. You can flick the stick to aim to someone completely different, and you can hit strike and hit them from across the map. It's actually really useful, but I don't do it all that much. But yeah, if you see any of those infected that fire projectiles, they're basically best friend, because they're giving you a free perfect dodge and slowing down time for a few seconds so you can wail on the bosses or the bigger enemies, build up your elemental fist. And I've got it charged up right now, but I'm not going to use it. It's more or less a feeling to figure out when to dodge with these enemies, but a lot of them are very easy to do so. But there's some real tough ones that we'll get to in a moment. You know, guys with baseball bats, guys with briefcases, some of the more bizarre infected. So yeah, I'm just going to use it on the baseball. She's going to fire a projectile, I'm going to dodge it. So you don't even have to be very close to the projectile to dodge it. You can actually be quite a distance. Now with the briefcase guys, go up to them and dodge to their right or their left, whichever way you want to go. The first strike is always the easiest. The second strike they do is a little bit faster, so it's harder to pull off, but you can still do it. And the third one, you can't get a perfect dodge at all because they slam the ground, and even though it doesn't have that much of a radius, just still stay away from it. And that's pretty much the end of the first chapter. This has been part 1 of my Eternights expert mode, the Apocalypse. And it's going to get a lot harder from that point on, but luckily you can get pretty broken with certain builds in this game. And I'm going to have a lot more time to explain the ins and outs of the combat and the way the different stats work and certain enemies you'll face. And in some downtime, just to talk about the characters, their relationship, the story and everything. There's room for a bit of everything in this game. Because there's going to be some videos that'll go on for a long time because it's all the downtime before the main story missions. And certain trophies that are pretty tough to achieve or very vague about how to achieve them. And I can go more into that in future videos as well. But not for a little while. Not while we're still focusing on the immediate story. So that's enough from me. I'll see you guys next time.